Oscar Wilde was famous even as an undergraduate for his taste, his clothing, his extraordinary pronouncements. He enraged and amused in equal turns vast sections of society when, for example, he declared that his ambition, when asked by journalists, still an undergraduate, to live up to his collection of blue china. This kind of language, this kind of attitude had never been heard before. There was something quite new about it. He was the archetype of the modern young man to the Victorian generation. He was always a large man. He was growing slightly tubbier, but he was very tall. His hair was extraordinarily long. He wore silk knee breeches and extraordinary fur coats. He looked quite startling. And he arrived famously in America with the words at the customs, "I have nothing to declare but my genius," and professed himself slightly disappointed with the Atlantic, and won the hearts of Americans everywhere, and went right into the Wild West, where he lectured on subjects like Benvenuto Cellini, the Renaissance silversmith and sculptor, and on The House Beautiful, which was a series of lectures about interior decoration.
Is Miss Lloyd connected to Lloyd's Bank?
No.
Pity.
But she's comfortable, Ada. 1,000 a year.
And I congratulate you, Lady Wilde. Now that Oscar's been to America and sown his wildier notes, it's time he settled down.
But weren't they very rough?
No, charming. Well, charming to me. With each other, it's true, they could be a little brusque. They hanged 2 men in the theatre one night just before I gave a lecture. I felt like the sorbet after a side of beef.
I think he chose Constance because he fell in love with her, and I think he fell in love with her because she was quiet and grave and beautiful and intelligent. She was a modern woman in the sense that she was by no means your average sort of Victorian dormouse wife, as it were. She had her own mind and her own views. She was a member of the Rational Dress Society and various other sort of modern, forward-looking institutions which were in turn to develop into things like women's suffrage. And she was no kind of doormat either. Not a doormat or a dormouse, but adorable.
He's so beautiful. Almost as beautiful as his mother. I don't know what I'd do without you. My constant Constance.
Of course, it was a different society. She did not expect to be involved in the world that Oscar lived, either professionally or intellectually. She did not expect to be able to keep her end up in conversation. Women did not have the opportunities for university education and so on. When they did learn things, it was always because they had read them themselves and they had to improve themselves. But she was a very extraordinary woman in her own way, very strong and courageous. And I think Oscar Wilde generally and genuinely loved her for that. And at this time, of course, there's no evidence whatsoever that he'd ever had any experience with anything other than the opposite sex.
My cousin, Lord Alfred Douglas, is here. He would very much like to congratulate you.
I think there's no doubt that there was some instinct in Constance that told her something was wrong, something was unhealthy about Wilde's relationship with Douglas. In that sense, she was right, even according to the most, liberal and, up-to-date views on these things. It was an unhealthy relationship, not because it was gay, but because it was just unequal, and they were destroying each other in their own way. And I think she sensed that, even if she didn't sense that there was a sexual element to their relationship, which, as I say, I think ended pretty early anyway. But she just knew there was something wrong. There was some sort of intensity, some sort of demand that each made on the other that was not normal amongst men.
This is Bosie Douglas. We met last year. Lionel brought me to tea at Tite Street.
How could I possibly forget?
I love your play. The audience didn't know whether you meant your jokes or not. You shocked them, especially with your speech. But the more frivolous you seem, the more serious you are, aren't you? I love that.
Thank you. I always say the young are the only critics with enough experience to judge my work.
Splendid.
We need shocking. People are so banal, and you use your wit like a foil. You cut through all those starched shirt fronts. You draw blood. It's magnificent. And we should draw some blood down in Oxford. You need a miracle. All the dons at my college have dust in their veins.
At which college do you educate the fellows?
Magdalen.
My own college. Well, I shall
claim the privilege of a graduate and come and take tutorials with you.
Come soon, then. They're threatening to send me down.
How could they be so cruel to one so beautiful? Wilde flourished, really, I suppose one could say, if one wanted to, it was a coincidence, but I think most people looking at it as a simple fact might draw some sort of conclusion, whatever it is, that he developed as an artist and started to write things that are permanent and enduring at exactly the same time that he discovered his own sexuality. It seemed to provide this enormous outpouring of great work. Before then, he'd been pretty pedestrian, a minor poet, a rather overflown kind of prose poet, and a fine critic always, but nothing utterly memorable. But it coincides exactly with his being seduced by Robbie Ross and his meeting with John Gray's second lover. The writing of A Picture of Dorian Gray, his only novel, and a work that most people will probably know something about a beautiful young man who's having his portrait painted and looks at it and wishes that he could stay like that picture and the picture could age instead of him. And we, the readers, discover that his wish is granted and he continues to be absolutely young and beautiful while his picture takes on all the qualities of his vice and his unpleasantness and his rattledness. A wonderful, chilling and extraordinary story and a great metaphor and an amazing sort of up there with Jekyll and Hyde as one of the great sort of Victorian ideas. And then he suddenly found his true voice, which was the same voice that he had as a conversationalist, which was a wit he'd never realized before, because in fact it simply wasn't a Victorian custom that wit could be used as an engine of art. It hadn't really happened since the 18th century. People were, Dickens had comedy, but no one had ever written these kind of brilliant theatrical comedies. This remarkable success he was fated. It's hard to understand how successful a playwright could be then. Ladies and gentlemen, I have enjoyed this evening immensely. The actors have given us a charming rendering of a delightful play, and your appreciation has been most intelligent. I congratulate you on the great success of your performance, which persuades me that you think almost as highly of this play as I do myself.
Oscar and Bosie.